right, good. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Policy and Projects Committee of the Athens in Motion Commission. Good to see you all. We had a month off. Lots been going on. We are in the middle of election season. I hope you all are finding time to vote. So I'd like to go ahead and, we'll assign a minute taker in a moment. Lots on our agenda today. And thanks for your patience while we got started. We'll do an update on the Complete Streets policy, and this is really, well, Daniel and I both watched the meeting, so I guess either one of us could talk about this. And some other items. So any additions, corrections, not corrections, changes to our proposed agenda? Right. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Aaron. Can I get a second? Second from Taylor. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. And can I get someone to volunteer to take some notes for us?
I'll volunteer.
Thank you, Randy.
Thanks, Randy.
All right. First item on the agenda is policy chair. So I have been sharing this policy for a while, and I also do the agendas for our big meeting. And I thought it might be a good idea to have one of the other commissioners be chair. And so to avoid crickets in the room, I went ahead and reached out to Randy, and I've spoken with him, and Randy at the time expressed an interest in being policy chair. So I'm going to make a motion today, but I did want to put it out there for discussion to be transparent about this process, before I make that motion. So was there anyone else who really wanted to be chair of this committee? Comments?
And especially with uncertainty with some of us possibly not being on the board, we'd like to be, but don't know how that's going to go with the process, because I'm up for cycling off, but I think Randy would be a great choice.
Yes, and you bring up a great point, Aaron, because Randy's also up for consideration for renewal.
Yeah, but
I
only had a partial, but
yeah, I know it's a bit odd because you're just kind of filling out a term, and we hope that Mayor and Commission will have you and Aaron and Teresa stay on. That's to be determined. So I guess with that in mind, Randy, do you have any regrets about being policy chair?
no, I'll take it, till at least through July anyway.
Yeah, and hopefully beyond.
Definitely, hopefully beyond.
Yeah. Thanks, Randy.
No problem.
Right. So I will make a motion to nominate and accept Randy as the chair of the Policy and Projects Committee, beginning with our next meeting in June. Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
All right, thank you, Aaron. All those, any further discussion? Right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Any opposed, same sign. All right. Thank you, Randy.
Yep.
Excited to have you on as policy chair, and maybe I can volunteer to take minutes sometimes for this committee.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is Complete Streets Policy update. So last night, the Mayor and Commission considered whether to keep the both let me see, they consider two things, whether to keep the complete streets rewrite on the consent agenda or to have further discussion. Teresa attended the meeting representing Athens in Motion, and she spoke both to the Complete Streets policy update, which we gave a presentation about a month ago on, and then the Vision Zero position that Transportation Public Works, of course, is proposing and is currently in the mayor's budget. So two commissioners spoke to, well, three, I guess, spoke to having more time to review the policy. That was Commissioner Link um, and that was Commissioner Myers. And then Commissioner Thornton also did not want to put it on the consent agenda. So Daniel and I had a discussion about this just a moment ago before we went live. And Daniel's understanding is that doesn't mean that we have to wait for the next cycle. It just means that it's not going to get wholesale approved with some other items. They're going to have further discussion. Is that right, Daniel?
Yeah, my understanding is that they were deciding whether or not to put it on the consent agenda, and they decided to keep it off so that they could discuss. So if you remember, during a typical voting session, they will opt to sometimes remove something from consent to discuss before they approve the consent agenda. And so the consent agenda usually just kind of passes through. Maybe they'll have some comments, but then there's the items for discussion that are laid out. So we are going to be one of the items for discussion at the regular session meeting on, I guess that is that next Tuesday? Or is that, I can't remember when that next.
Yeah. Yeah, are they meeting on, I can't remember, are they meeting on election day? Because we have a meeting, right?
Oh, they're probably meeting whenever they're doing their probably regularly scheduled meeting, but at their next voting session is when they will bring it up. So until then, you can contact commissioners and make sure, ask them, check and see if they have any questions. I think it would be helpful if anyone has voiced, support in the past, such as Laura Brackey. I think that's pronunciation. Sorry, Laura, if that's not. At American Heart Association has been really supportive of us going through with this. So reach out to her and see if we can just make sure there's no unanswered questions out there. As far as like contacting mayor and commission, is there a page that has all of their emails or something? Or how would that, what would be the mechanism? I don't ever contact them, so I'm not really sure how you do that, but.
Yeah, do you think that we as individuals should, or should it come from the chair?
Oh, I would say it would help to do it as individuals too, just as like, hi, I was on the committee working on this, and
Okay, yeah.
Here's the basic, 1 minute elevator speech, and then from there, see if they have questions, because I know that Commissioner Thornton had some concerns, but not sure. She didn't really go into detail. I think she's probably planning on bringing those up during the voting session. So it may be helpful to check with her and see if there's anything you can do to help answer questions, or any of the other commissioners even.
Yeah, it sounds like there was a little bit of confusion about how all of our documents interact with each other and what comes first and what comes second. So there was a complete streets policy passed in 2012. It doesn't have a lot of teeth to it. The Athens in Motion plan was accepted in 2018. The commission seated in 2019, and one of the goals for the Athens in Motion Commission was to update the complete streets policy and create Vision Zero plan. And so I think that our plan specifically mentions a strategic network for bike and pedestrian facilities, while the complete streets policy ensures that bike ped facilities are not separate or as an afterthought, but are an important part of any transportation related project. How else can we be clear about that, Daniel? Do you have any advice?
Specifically regarding what? Sorry.
Like, how we can best talk about these documents with our elected officials or even with the public, because it's a lot. It's jargon, really, and I think we're trying to be as clear as possible. Or do you think that we should emphasize more that Complete Streets again is something that we're already doing? It's just codifying it.
You know, it's one of those things where I think in general, we don't expect every member of the public to read every document that we create, because some of them are pretty technical, and we want to make it accessible. And I think, in my opinion, I think what the public hears loudest is action. And so something like this document isn't necessarily gonna, be a game changer for how we're operating. Like you said, we're already working on operating this way. With something like Complete Streets, it especially with the way that we wrote it, it's no longer we are choosing to be this inclusive or this, or account for all these other modes of transportation. It is we are obligated to the community to do that or justify why we aren't, right? So for a document like this, I don't expect everyone to go through and read this like, or have it on their nightstand as they're going to sleep, but it might help. But it's really for us to hold us accountable, and it can be referenced in the future for other programs and stuff. But really, what our goal is right now with it is just like a reference document that shows policy of what our transportation public works process will be, and how we can improve that. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, a difference I see between the Complete Streets and the master plan is that the Complete Streets is kind of big picture overreaching, and the master plan, while it speaks, the same type of language of being big picture, there's a lot of specifics in there. We picked out certain areas that we wanted to prioritize and work upon, but that was a snapshot in time. What's nice with the Complete Streets policy is that when things are happening now, for instance, when you look at Athena Road, where there's all that construction going on, it's a great opportunity while that's happening, to, if we had requirements that there had to be some sort of pedestrian or cycling walkways and shared roadways put in by policy, those things could happen because we can't keep updating the master plan, every year.
well, and I mean, with that, this particular policy, like even if they did pass this, a year ago, it wouldn't really change that kind of thing where private development is expanding the road, right? Like they're required through ordinance to do kind of what planning says, and there's various ways that they handle those types of improvements. But really, this is even just looking at if we have a project to upgrade a bridge and we look at replacing that bridge, we can't just say, you know what, the cheapest option is to just build it as is. So we're just going to do that. We're not going to build pedestrian or bike facilities across there. That Complete Streets policy really holds us to, we need to do a full exploration of what would it be to add these things. And if we're not going to add them, then we need to justify that, with kind of a memo situation. So, but like you say, in the future, it could be a really great opportunity to have private development look at Complete Streets as kind of a model.
Yeah, and I think it too. It just puts a a unified mindset in place when we're looking, when Athens-Clarke County is looking at making changes to either current regulations or, as you say, the road work expected by the county itself or by private individuals. So that we have a common thought as to what we're trying to achieve.
Yes, and I would say the plan, unfortunately involves a lot of retrofitting, which is expensive.
Yeah.
And starts from that vantage point where complete streets and like having a policy ensures that when a project comes up, even if it's not a bike and pedestrian project, right, that those are not an afterthought that add to our backlog of places that need infrastructure, right? So I guess that's one difference that I see, or how these things work together. The Complete Streets policy ensures that we're not continually adding to that backlog.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, commissioners and committee members, reach out to our commissioners, you know, and again, we want to underscore that, I mean, Daniel, would you say it's more of an internal document then, since we're holding TPW to this? Or is that a bit far?
You know, I don't know the answer to that
Yeah.
because there are official designations to things. So if I were to label it as an internal document, I don't really know if that is like going against what, like if that means something different in the attorney's office, then
Sure.
I don't want to mistake that. So I'm not sure,
Okay.
but it is for our internal reference.
Yes. Yes. And we are already doing these things. We're just codifying it.
Yeah.
All right. So I hope that gives some items to work with. And, we'll have a recording of this meeting. So feel free to share that with commissioners. Like, this is public, and I think it might be useful for them to hear our discussion around this. So that's why I'm asking these questions, so they can hear, some of our thought process on this, and it might be useful to them.
I think another really big takeaway for them to consider is, I think everyone's heard the adage of like, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Within this writing, we have created a plan to add continual improvements every year. So if there is something like right now where we're at is this is kind of what we've done up to now, and it's years worth of work in progress from multiple kind of even multiple chairs of the Athens in Motion Commission. And in my mind, the best thing we could do is get it approved so that we have an updated Complete Streets, which could potentially give us a better chance of getting some of this infrastructure funding, because some of the requirements and some of the grants call for these types of things. And the example I'll use is the Safe Streets for All. There's two versions of the grant, and one is the action planning grant and the other is implementation. And in order to apply for the implementation, there are the absolute like mandatory requirements that they have. And now they don't explicitly say Complete Streets, but there are things that are accomplished within our Complete Streets that could go towards that. And if this is approved in time for that grant, it changes our eligibility from, we can only apply for 200,000 to $1 million, all the way up to we can now apply for anywhere from 5 to 30 million. So that's a huge difference. And this is just one of many grants that are coming out. And we don't always know what the next one's going to be, and we're kind of taking it a day at a time. And I get maybe 2 or 3 webinar invites a week now for a new grant that I haven't heard of. So it's a lot to juggle, but these types of policies are just really great to get in. And then if this is something where for the next calendar year or fiscal year even, we should go ahead and start looking at how can it improve, and do that annual review so that, you know, and if this is something they want to take through the legislative review committee, I think it makes more sense to like approve it as is, and then they could do that next year's review through that committee, if that's something they want to do. But, you know, I really feel like most of what needs to be covered is covered, and anything in the future that kind of opens up as an opportunity to add in, we will absolutely jump on that. You guys have been great at kind of making sure that we're not dropping the ball on any of these things. And yeah, I just think that's my little 2 cents. But
like you said, it's a living document. I mean, we started off with a very basic complete streets policy, and we've added on, really improved it, and this is certainly not the last iteration of it.
Exactly. And of course, it's not a technical standard. It references them, which allows us to keep the policy up to date because those standards change. So that's what's great. Speaking of policy, next policy, Daniel has uncovered a partially written crosswalk policy. Daniel, you want to give the crew an overview of that?
yeah, I don't have it in front of me, or I should say it's not shareable. But I wanted to kind of get it on our radar and see if this is something that we wanted to add on to kind of some of our work plan. The original crosswalk policy that is kind of approved and on the record is, I believe, from 2004. I had a great conversation with traffic engineering a few years ago. Steve and Tim. So Steve was the old director before Steven, and Tim is the traffic engineer. They started kind of adapting the policy and changing it to update it. The original one was before RRFBs were invented, so they don't mention RRFBs. And then even since they did that update, now they did mostly an internal update, and so this is the kind of thing where when I say like it's an internal document, it's the kind of thing that may not actually need to go in front of mayor and commission for approval. It can be a memo update. That being said, this one's still considered draft, from what I've heard. With that, it kind of talks about the criteria to consider installing a crosswalk, whether it is at a unsignalized intersection, like at the end of a road where you're coming, you know, like where your road goes into a bit larger road and you have a stop sign. Like sometimes you'll see a crosswalk there, sometimes you won't. There are things that justify whether or not that crosswalk should be there. It categorizes the different types of crosswalks. It covers the criteria to consider crosswalks. This can also include mid-block crossings. So under the criteria to consider crosswalks, it talks about at traffic signals, for school zones, at mid-block locations, at non-signalized intersections. So they have all that criteria laid out there. And then there's also various features for a crosswalk. So for instance, you might have a mid-block crossing with no need for RRFBs because it is on a slow enough road and visible enough. So in some cases, there's the different types of marking with the standard GDOT ladder markings, or do we do the standard GDOT ladder marking with red brick thermoplastic? So all of these things have various considerations. Something that has not made it in here, because even since this update, we have other things that have been created. You know, pedestrian hybrid beacons, or PHBs, which have also been called hawks in the past. That's not really talked about here. I would like to double check, you know, as we look at doing more roundabouts in Athens, I think it would be helpful to know when to have an RRFB in a roundabout and when to not. This is a really great opportunity to have all of those kind of things standardized in a policy, so that it's also just really easy for everyone both on staff and who are requesting crosswalks to be able to see what are those counts and like what are the considerations. So I'd love to get y'all's eyes on it. I'm gonna run through an update with Stephen, just to kind of give him the same spiel that I gave you guys, and see kind of where he's at on it. And then I'm hoping that once we are kind of further along in the ordinance conversations, we could maybe come around to this, because I don't want to overload you guys too much. We got a lot of different things going on. So yeah, are there thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel, for finding this. Yeah, you were listing some examples there. I was like, oh yeah, why do we do that? When do we do what? For what reason? So I'm excited to look at this document and, finalize it.
And this is another case where our staff are already kind of using this as a reference point, because it's just this is what we're currently doing. I think it would be important to update that policy and have it on the record. So yeah, and then you can have 2 policies crossed off your list, hopefully.
Hopefully. Yeah. Thoughts from the rest of the committee about taking this on?
When would we be able to look at this policy? You said it was more of a non-shareable thing.
I mean, I guess anything shareable with open records request, but I just want to talk to Stephen first, because he hasn't, Tim was working with the previous director, and this just hasn't made it onto Stephen's desk yet. So through conversations with traffic engineering, I kind of got updated from where they left off, and then wanted to get Stephen in on that. And I did already give him a brief explanation, and he said it makes a lot of sense to get it in front of you guys. So I think once I get a chance to kind of sit down with him, and I'll probably share it through email first, and then that'll allow y'all to kind of take some notes and read over it as we go into the discussions to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm all for crosswalk standardization policy. It's always a thing about enforcement. That's where I always feel it's lacking, all over. There's frequently used crosswalks that are very dangerous because there's no impetus for enforcement from law enforcement, it seems like. But I know it's a separate issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, this is all about when do we install a marked crosswalk, and what type of safety features are there. It's really banking on the driver being, smart and careful and educated on how that works.
So would this incorporate things like when a pedestrian lead button might be installed? Or
yeah, I think
would this be like anti-beg button?
Well, I don't know about anti-beg button. I think I would say it's probably it probably would outline the criteria, right, of when to use one versus the other. So if you think about, for instance, just the raised concrete pedestrian refuge islands should be considered when the roadway is 3 lanes or more, traffic volumes exceed 10,000 vehicles per day, or measured traffic vehicle speeds of 35 miles per hour or higher. The number of observed pedestrians is greater than 20, or any combination of the 1 through 5 criteria, right? So there's kind of like multiple things that could then justify that, or when to use rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So this really is all a data approach of looking at the traffic volumes, looking at the road speed, and not just the kind of marked speed, but the actual observed speed. And then the number of crossing pedestrians. You know, we have counters that we put out to do that. But all of this runs through our data, our traffic data team, which is currently one guy, which is why we have such a long wait time on it. But you know, with that, he goes through, he gets all this data together, and then that data is then presented to traffic engineering, the traffic engineer or myself, and from there we can make a justification of a determination really on what goes in.
Daniel, is there anything that triggers like an evaluation, aside from, you know, putting in like some other sort of like, aside from some sort of road construction project?
Right now, that is mostly through requests. We don't.
What else would trigger an evaluation as far as like meeting those metrics?
So, you know, no, I guess if it's been requested, and there's about a 6-month delay on traffic studies, if that gives you any idea of like how far back we are. But some of the other things that also this factors into is when we're building new facilities, even as we are doing those improvements, we'll look at the plan and we'll say, oh, well, based on traffic patterns, we have a feeling that this area needs a mid-block crossing. And then that will go through this process as well. So something like Cherokee Road, for instance, that has some mid-block crossings in there, and those run through this process. Where it gets a little tricky is when the infrastructure is not there, no one's making that crossing. So you can't really make that determination based on traffic volume or pedestrian counts, but we can still look at the other criteria. And then as far as like other things that could trigger it, road safety audits will trigger that type of thing where, you know, one of our sub projects when we looked out at Tallahassee was to do RRFBs at the roundabout there. And after looking at the data and then looking at kind of just observing, it wasn't really an issue in the single lane roundabout. But looking at something a little larger, like the double lane roundabout at West Broad Street, for instance, that is one where, and we've talked to like various design professionals too, because this is kind of the question I had is, hey, is this necessary? Because, you know, if we're going to have RRFBs at one roundabout, then that kind of sets the precedent that we have them at every roundabout. And so what is that precedent? And so the single lane roundabouts, from all the conversations I've had, it's not really like the pedestrian vehicle conflict isn't really as big of a deal. Like there's not a very high number of crashes. Like that is already just slowing down the cars and making it less of a threat to pedestrians. But then on the double lane roundabout, such as what we're putting in over on West Broad Street, that's one where we felt like, especially on those busier arterial roads, you really want to have that extra signal because there's a lot going on. You got 2 lanes. So we're actually installing, I think in the design, it's showing 5 RRFBs right now. It's 2 for each approach on West Broad. So you got 1 for one of the double sets of lanes and then 1 for the outgoing sets of lanes, and then same on the other end. So 4 RRFBs on West Broad and then 1 going across Hancock. And then on the smaller roads that don't really need the RRFB, we're looking at doing raised crosswalks there to slow down vehicles as they're coming in and kind of get them to recognize that sidewalk space is theirs, is the pedestrians. So, yeah.
Okay, so Daniel, if you, as you said, whenever this draft policy is available, you'll send it out to the rest of us, and then we can put that on the next policy and procedures meeting for review.
Yeah, I'll get a follow up.
Okay.
I need to do a follow up with Stephen to see where we want to work it into schedule.
Okay.
And I guess I also kind of curious from you guys, would you prioritize that, or maybe should we take a stab at kind of the next item on the agenda, which would be the low hanging fruit of the ordinance discussion? Like, which of these ordinances are things that we could probably that you think would be kind of going through that list, determine which ones are fairly easy, like low hanging fruit that I could, like for instance, the no parking in bike lanes. In that conversation with the attorney's office, we basically drafted up an ordinance that everyone agreed with within a couple emails. It's not controversial. It's just you can't park in the bike lanes. So looking through the rest of that list, I'm curious, just kind of, and I know we probably don't have time to go through that list, but in terms of going through that list to determine which ordinances you want me to prioritize and work with the attorney's office on, do we want to do that first, or would you want to do something like this crosswalk criteria document first?
For the bike ordinances first is priority.
Yeah, just which one would you prefer, bike ordinances or crosswalks? Or we could do both at the same time. I don't know if the meetings will work out.
What were some of the? Can you remind us what some of the higher priority ordinances were?
Yeah, I have the link copied here, so I can send that in chat. But a good place to look could be all of our ones that are ranked high, so 5, 4, 5, and then also look at our notes because there's some of these that maybe they already exist or they're you know, not actionable.
Do you want to share those for viewers?
Yeah. All right, so we had about 43 that we went through in a couple of meetings. And so some of these we ranked highly. Some of them were less of a priority.
Yeah, like vulnerable road user was a high one.
So we have this. Let me see. Yeah, that's not really a law there.
So I guess which ones? So that I guess they need to be like which ones were rated as a high priority, and which ones like which of those do you think that you would consider low hanging fruit that you could get action made on? Like I guess they need to they need to fall in both of those categories, right?
Yeah, so I guess that I mean that's a good point. Like I could just using this spreadsheet, I think we went through it all. I now know some of y'all's priorities, and I could put together and just kind of I don't know what the timeline would be on that, but we could look at determining which ones are low hanging fruit from a staff perspective.
Yeah, actually that's a good point. Yeah, what's low hanging fruit for you all?
So what I'm hearing is, and I know that was just like one thing, so feel free to jump in. I can look at everything basically from a 4 to 5 and then figure out which of those, obviously they have to also be ones that we don't already have. But figuring out which of those would be good to add. And I can have like an internal conversation with staff to figure out, hey, what are our thoughts on this? And then maybe three, I'm thinking like I could do an agenda for one single ordinance at a time, but it may just be easier to do like 2 or 3, wrapped into one of the agenda cycles.
Yes. And I'm just kind of going through marking some that are bold. And Daniel, I think that it would be okay you could even look at some of these that maybe, are in the upper 3s too, if it seems like it's actionable or just requires a conversation or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know, Daniel, you had initially said that this would mainly be your position working with the attorney's office, right? And then coming back to us with language. Is that still the case? I feel like a lot of that would fall on your shoulders then. Is there any way we can help further?
If you guys have kind of a rough outline, I mean, some of these have models in the like bike friendly community, and so we can start with some of those. I know Cole had done a lot of really great work to put that info together for me, so I can start there. If it's something that somebody is really passionate about and wants to kind of take a stab at, I'd be interested to see that as well. I mean, ultimately, I don't know what order, but I'd love you guys to have feedback into the sound of it. And we absolutely require the attorney's office to have feedback into the sound of it. So they would need final approval. So I don't know if that means I go and have a conversation with them first, or it may be more helpful to have a conversation with you guys first and kind of get that I can work it out with staff, outside of the attorney's office, other TPW staff. And then once we determine which ones we feel are low hanging fruit, bring that back to the group. And then from there, y'all could help me put some of the ordinances together. That's a thought.
Sorry, I'm trying to make this spreadsheet work a little bit better. Because I want to rank it by this last column for you. But I want to have the original order of stuff too.
Yeah, it's weird with the way that Google Sheets is. It may have to be opened in a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Come on. Don't you understand me? Committee thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I like focusing on this since we've been working on this for a while now, and yeah, going for what we can get done, the least amount of effort here. So thanks, Daniel, for putting all the time you have into this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as Aaron said, I mean, there's a lot of work that's been done here, so why not take this to completion as far as we can.
Yeah.
I'm missing some rows. Why am I missing some rows?
Are they
Oh
hidden?
no. Oh boy. Did we? Oh, remove. Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Great. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yes. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Cool. All right. So then now I can sort by average. Let's do the other way.
It's funny when I'm on my, like in my computer looking at it, it's just, it's changing all over the place. It's funny.
I'm sorry. I know it does
No,
that.
you're good. It's
Clicks
sorting. I'm like,
around.
oh, cool. This is great.
Yeah, I also know like the spreadsheet just does not stay in a really great place for viewers, and I'm sorry for anyone watching this. I'm trying to turn this into a work session, not just a discussion. But okay, I think I have ranked this now, Daniel. So you can see the ones that are at the top, or the ones that are not validating, I guess.
And then I can also color code these, and I can do like
Yeah.
red for difficult and
Yeah.
or like orange for difficult. And then maybe like green or blue. We'll do green for low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I don't I'll do like maybe just leaving it blank for unsure.
Okay, yeah.
But
All right, so I'm hearing, I heard from Aaron that we definitely want to continue working with the bike lane or the bike ordinances, because we've already spent a lot of time on this. And I'm also looking again, I feel like I keep bringing this up, for anything about micromobility too. So not just bikes. So if we can make sure that we're not painting ourselves into a corner with one kind of form of transportation, because there are plenty of other vulnerable users as well. If you're on your own personal scooter or a skateboard or an electric skateboard or one wheel skates, you know,
Yeah.
vulnerable.
I even knew somebody who used a Segway because he wasn't able to drive a vehicle, so he got around quite effectively on a Segway. Yeah.
There you go.
I was just having this conversation with somebody where it's basically been talked about where they're like, well, with scooters, you know, no one really knows where they should be. And so should they be on the sidewalk? Should they be on the road? And I'm like, I mean, I think it's pretty evident that they shouldn't be on the road with a 3-ton or multi-ton vehicle. But yeah.
I mean, you can make that same argument about bicycles, though. You know.
Absolutely. And that's where that vulnerable road user designation, I think, can come into play. But I think it would be important to, I mean, building out that network. But then, like, does the scooter belong in the bike lanes? Like, maybe. I don't know.
Yes, yes. And Daniel, I know you and I
Safety
talked
one.
about this, and this is kind of for another discussion, but I see like we need at least three kinds of infrastructure. We have the roads for the fast cars or for cars, right? We have the sidewalks, which are not just for people walking, right? It's for our most vulnerable users. So that's kids on bikes, folks on wheelchairs, anyone, you know, who really needs to be separate. And then this in-between infrastructure where you are too fast to share facilities with our most vulnerable users, but you are still a vulnerable user. You're just going a bit faster, maybe like up to 15, 20 miles an hour. So that would be like our bikes, our electric bikes as well, and of course all those other things that we just mentioned. And I think that would include scooters too. And you just have speed limits for that kind of stuff. Or if there's a multi-use path, you know, we have speed limits on our multi-use paths, 15 miles an hour. Just adhere to the speed limits. But this also, going forward, we'll have to stress this to our elected officials that one piece of infrastructure doesn't work for everyone. And we may still, even if we have a multi-use path, may still need to have sharrows on roads or bike lanes or things like that. So,
Yeah.
all right, so we have 2 minutes and we wanted to talk about workflow and going forward. Barber Street is going to make a comeback. Don't call it a comeback.
Oh, yes, probably. I think end of summer. I need to get. I think that's something that I would really like to get from Ronnie. Is let's let's get just a status update, like a table of all of the projects. That's one of the confusing parts with not necessarily having things fully approved. It's hard to keep track of like what stage in the process. This is where project managers in our engineering division are really helpful. They know where the projects are at. I do not necessarily know all that. I have seen our kind of first stab at the Barber Street segment 4 lane concepts. So when I get more info, I will bring that to you. And I think same goes for, I haven't gotten a full picture, but we just had a meeting. There was a question last night about Hancock and no, Hawthorne and Oglethorpe intersection. And so that's a request that we're currently working on answering for one of the commissioners. So we'll have a better idea of where we're at on that project as well as others. So, and I do have an update. So we're restriping a couple intersections at where we did some previous restriping work. So Hull and Lumpkin, we got some feedback and some concerns about the striping plan. You know, that plan was kind of done before I got here, but we prioritized some of that. And even though we're not going to be doing the full depth reclamation for Baxter, we did get the concept for that, which I think it was enough information to kind of prove to me that we should probably explore like a future Baxter corridor wide project and see where that falls out in the prioritization. So obviously all of these projects will be reprioritized when we run that tool, but that's one where I'm curious to see where that comes out, because the bike facilities that currently exist there, after riding on them and seeing where they have these 1 foot deep holes every time there's a stormwater inlet, and no buffer, and like it, and pavement goes to the gutter. And I talked to our staff and I was just like, hey, like, this doesn't seem very safe. And they're like, well, you know, like that's what Mayor Commission had voted on. And so that's how it happened. And so I think it's been long enough since that project was done where we could actually look at maybe some counts to see were those bike lanes successful. And, you know, I think with the big question of what is better, like building substandard bike lanes or none at all. And depending on the road, I think you would get different answers, but we can look at data to see where what does the cycling traffic look like on Baxter, to see like how much they're used and see if that fits what kind of our thoughts were with like what we would expect to see for that area. And then I could see that being a really great future project to expand and, you know, add in extra protections and stuff. Because it calls for buffered bike lanes in the Athens Emotion Plan. So can't remember if it's tier 1 or 2 though. So that's an important thing too. And I know this is kind of a grants thing, but that Safe Streets for All grant, we need to kind of take a deep dive and look at the plan to see what projects that are prioritized in the Athens in Motion Plan could be considered for implementation. One of the main considerations, obviously, in this grant is safety. So it's not necessarily, hey, we want to use our Athens in Motion funding to like match all of the tier 1 projects. We really would need to like dig in deep and say, okay, you know, here are the like tier 1 projects that would bring the biggest benefit to increasing safety in our community. So And that's the 80-20 match. So it'll help to have the T-SPLOS funds if that gets approved.
Yes, yes. And how much is that grant again? The
Implementation grants can range from 5 to 30 million with a 20% match from us. So if it's $25 million grant that we're applying for, I hope I'm doing the math right, 5 million, right? Yeah. So where we have a $5 million grant, you know, or like a $5 million bucket of funds right now, for a project, we could potentially, you know, explore. So like just one thing that pops in mind because it's fresh is, you know, Tallahassee Road. We have $4 million to go towards Tallahassee Road multi-use path. What will it cost to do a full multi-use path out there? Probably more in the range of, you know, that times 5. So if we did a $20 million grant for the entirety of multi-use path along that road and traffic safety things, and we have the road safety audit that was done as kind of a reference point, then those are things that we could explore of, you know, really being able to extend our existing funding into doing these corridor-wide projects and not just filling in sidewalk gaps like we're doing with, and SPLOS is doing a great job with the Lexington stuff. It's just, in order for us to just get the sidewalk gaps filled, that's going to use up most of the money that was allocated in that corridor. And, you know, if I'm looking at that, I see that as, you know, that's getting us up to the bare minimum of what we should be creating. Like building sidewalks on that corridor isn't going to like bring like game-changing like development to Lexington. But what it will do is it'll give people who are currently walking on that corridor access to walk safely and not in the road or tall grass, that kind of thing. And so I think when we start to look at different projects that could be eligible for this kind of thing, it's good to also start with what do we have money for for these projects, and then which of the projects would really fit the bill the most. So we're having that discussion with the grants committee on Friday. You guys are all welcome to come. I'll be sending that invite out soon. If I didn't already, I may have done that already. So love to get feedback on it. Love to get some ideas. And you can find the NOFO at SS for A. If you just Google SS for A NOFO, then it'll pop up. It's 30 pages, but there's some sections that I think you can just read through a couple of the first pages to really fully see what the scope of this could be. So. Did I push us over enough to...
That's okay. We started a little bit late. Yeah, sorry everyone that we're over. But that's all I've got. We do have our full commission meeting next week, so I will put out a call for agenda items tomorrow. Next Tuesday, of course, is also election day. Early voting is going on now. I hope that you all will vote. There's a lot of early voting locations. I still need to cast my ballot.
Same.
I did mine first week.
Nice.
Good job.
So
All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Randy, for taking notes, and look forward to having you as our chair of the policy committee for the summer and hopefully beyond. And I hope everyone has a good night, and I'll see you next Tuesday.
Okay.
All right.
see y'all.
Yep.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye.